on 29a, Chav Tes Amud Aleph, the sixth line in. Amar Rabbi Abo, my so in the previous Mishnah, in the previous Gemara, we saw that the Gemara made a distinction between the sun rays that come up over the horizon just at dawn, when the first light starts coming up over the horizon, and moonlight that would start, and that the moonlight was a ray, a straight ray of light, and the sunlight sort of dispersed. And the Gemara says, "My taima the Rebbe." What's the basis? What's the source for Rebbe? And this is a beautiful idea that comes up a lot. Even though that there's something in nature, you can observe it, you can look at it, and the Gemara still seeks a pasuk that will show this. Where do we find something like this in the pasuk in the Torah itself? The Chsiv, for it says, "Lamnatzeach alayelas hashachar." Lamnatzeach is the beginning of a Tehillim, to the conductor or to the one who grants salvation, grants a victory. Alayelas hashachar, literally, or the simple translation would be to the gazelle of the morning. So what does that mean? So ma ayala zu karnea mafzilos, just as a gazelle, its horns split. So what we call a gazelle, I think has a straight horn. So ayala is a different type of animal like that, but it's in the deer gazelle family that has antlers more than a horn, where they split off into, the horn splits into different parts. So just as the horn of the ayala splits off to parts, lakan, so that's the antlers. Ka'af shachar, so too the morning, zeh maftzia lakan, it splits off to sides as well. So the morning, the meaning of ayelas hashachar is the morning which is like a gazelle. So a song to the morning, whose rays split off from side to side. It forks. That's right. Just as the horns of the ayala. Amar Rabbi Zera, Lama nimshula Esther la'ayala. Now the Gemara in Megillah tells us that this song was sung by Esther when she got to the house of Achashverosh, where she told Mordechai, "I'm not allowed to go. Anybody that goes uninvited is going to be put to death." And Mordechai says, "Look, salvation is going to come to Bnei Israel. Somehow we're going to be saved anyhow, but you can be a part of this. And if you don't, then you won't be a part of it." And she is a part of history because of that moment. And so she went into Achashverosh, and on the way she sings this song, this Tehillim, Al Ayelas Hashachar. So that means that she would be the reference in Ayelas Hashachar, the gazelle of the morning. So what does this mean? Lama nimshula Esther Ayala. Why is she like an ayala? Lemelacha, to tell you, ma ayala rachma tsar. So this gazelle, its womb is very tight and has a difficulty birthing, and nevertheless, as chaviva al bala kol shavasha, she is beloved to her husband, it mates regardless of that difficulty. So there's a love and a belovedness regardless. Kishar, just as the first moment, as we know that the initial spark, the initial moment of a connection can be great. But it doesn't necessarily always remain. It can become stale. But she keeps that joy and belovedness throughout. Af Esther is a chaviva l'Achashverosh kol shavasha k'sharashana. So too Esther was beloved to Achashverosh like the first moment he met her or saw her throughout the time. So this is a miracle. Achashverosh, seemingly a less than stable person and who could have been moody, and nevertheless the constant was, and this was the miracle, the constant was his love for Esther, and as a result it brought about the salvation, the redemption of Bnei Yisrael. Amar Avasi, Lama Nimshla Esther L'Shachar. Why? In what way is Esther like the morning? It says it's like the morning gazelle. So we see why she's like a gazelle, but why like the morning? As the morning star, the ray of light is the end of all night. Af Esther Sev Kol Anisim, Esther is the end of all miracles. Now this is a very peculiar thing. Why would miracles be considered the night? Nighttime is darkness, lack of vision, and light is clarity. So why would Esther be the end of miracles? Why would miracles be the end, be nighttime? But the Maharsha here explains that if we think about it, all the great miracles all happen at nighttime. And at the end of the Haggadah, there's a song, Az Reiv Nisim Ifleisa Balayla. Then all or most of the miracles you did wondrously at nighttime. So the splitting of the sea, the death of the firstborn, and it goes through in the Megillah. It says Balayla hu nadash nas hamelech, that the king that night the king couldn't sleep. Many miracles that happen at nighttime, and the idea is that a miracle is a ray of light in darkness. In the world, nature, history, it masks the hand of Hashem in all of our lives. So we can't see it. Miracles are in that darkness of not seeing Hashem. There's the ability to see a ray, to see an illumination of Hashem's guiding hand in history and in nature that will show up. However, in daytime, we don't need a miracle because we can see the miracle in the mundane. We can see the miracle in everything that happens in nature, in that a fruit grows of a tree, and that a tree grows of a seed, and that life itself, and that a heart can pump, and that kidneys work. I mean, these are all miracles, and in daytime, in clarity, we can all see that. But miracles are nighttime, and unfortunately, that level of miracle that happened with Esther and beforehand, where there was a true illumination in the darkness of night, Esther was that end, and so the last of that, and so therefore Esther is the Shachar, is that morning star, the end of the night. Vayikra Chanukah. Wait, but there's another miracle that happened after that. It's true, but however, Nitna Likasef. It's the last of the miracles that are written in the Tanakh. Nitna Likasef Kamrina. That's fine, according to the opinion that Esther was indeed supposed to be written. But as we will see in the Gemara Megillah, that's not so clear at all. But according to the opinion that Esther was not meant to be written at all, what are you going to say about that? And this is, by the way, Machlokes in the Gemara Megillah in regards to, we see the Gemara tells us over there that Sifrei HaKodesh cause tumah to the hands. You're not supposed to touch the Sefer Torah itself, the properly written Sefer Torah, or even other books of the Tanakh. You don't touch the scroll. You'll notice in shul if somebody's doing a hagbah and you need to fix the cloth, you need to fix the parchment to go around the Sefer Torah properly. They use a talis to lift it. You don't touch it with your bare hands. So that's not so for a Megillah. Megillah you touch with your bare hands. So that's a part of this idea that it's not really in the same way as the rest of the Sifrei HaKodesh. Because Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes said in the name of Rabbi Lazar, Why? In what way are the tefillah prayers considered like an ayala? And tefillah is called shachar. And it says, Ruchi bekirbi ashachareka. My spirit is within me, and I will seek you out. I will pray to you. So shachar is also a word of prayer, of tefillah, not just morning, the morning star, which we talked about, but it's also, it has another meaning, a tefillah. So the tefillah of tzaddikim is like the gazelle. In what way? Ma ayala zu calls manshmegadelas karnea mafitzilos. As the larger it gets, the more its horn, its antlers fork. Af tzaddikim calls manshamarben betfilot tfilosim nishma. So too the prayers of tzaddikim, the more they daven, the more it spreads and permeates, and we can see the effect of their tefillah, how it's being heard, as it were. So that's the end of this Agadata. Now the Gemara goes back to the Mishnah, where the Mishnah said that they would call out Barkai, they would call out and say that they'd see the morning star, and the question was asked, do you see it even up to Hebron? And we say yes. And the Mishnah says the reason was because they had a mistake that happened where the moon came up, and they thought it was the sun, and they shechted the korban too early. And then the Mishnah goes on and says that the Kohen Gadol went down to the mikveh. Now the Gemara at first thinks that that's all a part of that story, and so what was going on? If it's talking about that the moon came up and looked like a sun for a moment, and they shechted the korban, so then it wouldn't have been the Kohen Gadol. Anybody can shecht it. And if the Kohen Gadol did it, that means it was Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, that's only the 10th of the month. The moon at dawn, the moon would not be visible anymore. It would not, only at mid-month would the moon be visible at dawn. So Shachtes Atamid Emas. What is this part of the story going on? Is it talking about any day of the year? So why was it the Kohen Gadol who was doing it? Couldn't it be anybody? Yom Kippur, it must be talking about Yom Kippur. Is there the moon that can confuse them at dawn? No, the Gemara says no. It's a different discussion. First, it interrupted the discussion. It started off with saying that the designated person would say Barkai, the morning has come. Then it interrupted with this idea that they would make sure that it was illuminating all the way to Hebron, to make sure it was a sun because of a mistake that happened. Period. End parentheses. And then it went back to the Mishnah of Yoma, which is talking about what the Kohen Gadol will do on Yom Kippur, and says, and by the way, after we interrupted and said that we made these announcements of making sure that it was illuminating all the way because of the moon that was mistaken for the sun, and they shechted the korban. Now we go back to Yom Kippur and say that the Kohen Gadol in the morning, after it was announced that it was morning, he would go to the mikveh. So this is what it says. Back to the Mishnah that we're talking about on Yom Kippur. Ki Amar Barak Barkai, when he said that the shine had given off some glow, that they saw their first rays. The Kohen Gadol went to the mikveh. Tani avu ed Rabbi Avin leizu bilvad amru ela af melikas ha'oif v'kemitzas mincha b'layla tisarif. So after we understand the Mishnah, we now go back to that story. And in that story, it said that they mistook the moonlight for the first rays of the sun and the daytime, and they shechted the tamid. They shechted a lamb for the morning, for the korban tamid, the daily korban, in the morning, and they then realized that it was just the moon they saw, and so they had to invalidate that and and take that out to be burned as an invalid carbon outside Yerushalayim in the place where the ash went. So the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Avin said it's not only the morning carbon or a lamb that is shechted during the nighttime that makes it invalid, but really even a bird, if it was malika done, which is the form of slaughtering a bird as a bird carbon in the Beis Hamikdash, or kamitzas mincha, or even the separating of a mincha, the kametz that's done for a mincha. So they bring a meal offering, and there were various types of meal offering, but whether it was flour or broken up, or sort of like a breadcrumbs, or broken up pieces of bread, matzah. So the kohen would then go ahead and take a fistful and put it into a vessel, a holy vessel, a bowl, and that sanctified it, and then he would bring it onto the mizbeach. And that's the equivalent of shechting. It's the shechting is the separating of one part from the other, that of the animal, the part that's going to go onto the mizbeach, the spritzing of the blood. So too, in a mincha, when the kohen takes the fistful, the koimitz, and he's going to put it on the mizbeach, that is the equivalent of the shechita, meaning that the part that's taken out to be taken to the mizbeach. That too, if done during nighttime, would invalidate the whole korban. That's what Rabbi Avin said. To which the Gemara, and it needs to be burned, like we said about the lamb. So the Gemara is going to challenge and say, I don't understand this. I understand why by a lamb, if a mistake has happened, it's invalid. You know why? Because you can't unslaughter it. It's dead. And the same goes with the bird. Yeah, you can't unslaughter it. And if it was done by mistake, it's invalid. But with the meal offering, with the kaimetz, it's just flour. It's just breadcrumbs, matzah crumbs, whatever it is. Just put it back into the bowl, mix it up, and then take another fistful. Right? Why is it invalid? Just put it right back in. Bishlama, unless so I understand with the bird oila might have it. What happened. It's unfortunate. You can't unslaughter it, and so if by mistake you slaughtered this bird, you did malika prior to sunrise or prior to dawn. So it was done during the nighttime and it's invalid. So you have to get another bird. That one's going to be invalid. But with the kaimitz, with the fistful that you take out of the meal offering, nahadra, we're on Chav Tesamid base 29b. Nahadra, why don't you just put it back in and then it just goes back into the bowl? And then go ahead and do the kamitza again during daytime. What's the big deal? What's the big deal if you did it by nighttime? Now, the whole idea that a mincha can't be done at night is actually not clear at all, because there are some minchas that can be done at night. A minchas nesachim, a mincha that comes along with libations of a carbon, that actually can be done at night, as long as the carbon that it's coming along with was done by day, so then it can be done by night, and just as the other parts of the remainder of that carbon can be done at night. But in any case, an independent mincha cannot be done at night, and it should be invalid, and it is invalid, but fine. So it's invalid, but you can bring it back to life. Just take it out of the bowl that you put it into, all that fistful, put it back into the mixture, and then retake a kamitza, retake a fistful on once it's daytime. So that's the question. So he says, "Utani lav amar la." He was the one that taught this and asked the question, and he also answered it. And he says, you know what? So the way this becomes sanctified, and as I mentioned a moment ago, is that the kohen would take the fistful, and he would put it into a kli shares, a holy vessel, as the bowl that's going to bring it onto the mizbeach. And by doing so, that kli, that vessel, sanctifies the mincha, the kometz, and now you can't put it back in because it's already sanctified, it's already kaddish, and once it's sanctified, it can't become unsanctified by putting it back into the mixture, right? And that's the reason. Just like you cannot bring back the bird to life or the lamb to life, this kamitza cannot go back into the mixture anymore because it's already been sanctified by the vessel it's in. And this is a concept of klisharis mekachin, that the vessels of service, they affect and define the kedusha, the sanctification. So anything that's going to go on the mizbeach, the klisharis, the holy vessel, is its sanctifier, if you would. Okay, it makes it's mekadesh. It makes it kaddish, and so you have a part of this meal offering that's now sanctified, and there's a din in the shirayim that the remainder has a concept of shirayim, of the leftovers, which has also halachas of what has to be done. The kohanim eat it, so it's already affected. It already. Even though it's not physically like the loss of life for the lamb and the bird, but it is an irreversible kedusha that happened, irreversible halacha that happened to this at this point because it was sanctified and the kamitza was sanctified. The rest of it became shirayim, and you can no longer mix them back in. So Gemara is going to challenge this. One important point, and what Rabbi Yavin is saying is that even though that this is the wrong time of the day, even though it's at night where it's not valid as a carbon, nevertheless, the vessel has the power to affect it to become sanctified in this way. That's a crucial part here, right? That even though that it was nighttime where it's not valid as a carbon, right? You can't bring the mincha at that time. And so you did it wrong. You just were mistaken. You thought it's morning already and you did it and it wasn't. It was the moonlight that you saw, etc. But nevertheless, the vessel is going to have the power to affect its kedusha, even though it's not the right time. And that the Gemara is going to challenge. Say, wait, we're about to see that only a carbon that can be brought at night can become sanctified in a vessel at night. And for a carbon that has to be brought by day, it can only be sanctified in a vessel by day. So yes, it's true that generally we say when the kohen takes the kamitza, he takes that fistful of the meal offering and he puts it into a kli, into a vessel. That vessel sanctifies it and makes it the part that goes on the mizbeach, and the rest of it becomes the shirayim, the leftovers that the kohen gets to eat. Even though that's true, but that's only during a time that it's a valid carbon. Not what you just said, that even at nighttime, even shalom ismani, when it's not the proper time, it can do that. And therefore, our question is back in place. The question's back. Why don't you just take the kamitza and put it back in? After all, what did you say? Because it became sanctified already? That's not true. It can only be sanctified in its proper time and not during the nighttime. Mesa Vesa, we challenge, right? We ask a question. Zeh haklal, this is the general rule. Kol hakarev b'yoyim, kadosh b'yoyim, v'chol hakarev b'layla, kadosh b'layla. That all that can be brought, anything that can be brought by day is sanctified by day. And anything that can be brought at night, which is what we mentioned, the minchas nesachim, the mincha that comes apart as long as the carbon, and so that can be brought even at night because the carbon was brought already. So, kol hakara b'layla, kadosh b'layla, that's where sanctification can happen even at night, right? And that which can be brought both at day and night. Anytime, kadosh bein miyayim bein b'layla can become sanctified both by day or by night. Katani miyas. But what in any case, what we learned was kol hakara b'yoyim, kadosh b'yoyim. Anything that's brought by daytime can be sanctified only by daytime. B'yoyim in, b'layla loy. only by day and not by night. And so how can you say that a mincha, that the kmitza was done by nighttime and put into a vessel? Because it's in a vessel, it's sanctified, it cannot be put back into the mixture, and it becomes invalid, and we have to toss the entire mincha because it was done incorrectly, and we have to restart. That's not true. The vessel doesn't sanctify it at night. The vessels can only sanctify it by day, as we have this brisa teach us. So the Gemara says, Dilma, perhaps, ain't a kaddish likarev. Perhaps you're right. When this brisa says that a vessel cannot sanctify it at night if that's not the correct time to bring the carbon, it only is effective. It only changes the status of this meal offering once it's already the correct time to bring the offering, to bring the carbon. And so when the kohen takes the kmitza and puts it in a vessel, and it's the proper time for that carbon, it will turn it into a sanctified meal offering. Maybe that's only in regards to holy enough to actually go on the mizbeach. However, it is still holy once it goes into a vessel, only not enough to make it sanctified. So then in what way is it kadosh? In what way is it holy? Enough to make it invalid. Aval kadosh li pasel. It's enough to say, well, this is now irreversible, and it's going to become invalidated by it going into the vessel. So perhaps that's what the meaning is. And so now we're saying, you're right. In order for it to become kaddish, it has to have sanctified in the vessel. It has to be during the daytime. But there are two levels of sanctification. There is a level of kedusha, of sanctification, where this becomes so kaddish that it can now go on the mizbeach. That's A. However, there's a lesser degree of kedusha, where you put it into a vessel at the wrong time. It's not sanctified in regards to it going on the mizbeach, but it is sanctified in as much as now it'll become invalidated if it's done incorrectly, if something wrong happens to it. So we know that the halacha is that there are many invalidations of a carbon, and it can become invalid if someone that's tamei touches it. It can become invalid if it leaves the Beis Hamikdash, right? And it can be invalid if it's left overnight. So since you sanctified this during the night and the morning comes, that invalidates it because it was overnight. The morning coming, meaning the end of the night, is the moment that it became invalidated for being overnight. And so that's what happens. It was sanctified to the degree that it now can become invalidated, but you couldn't put it on the mizbeach because it was the wrong time. And maybe that's what's going on here, that it was sanctified in the vessel to the degree that you cannot put it on the mizbeach, but it isn't enough to make it kadosh to put on the mizbeach. However, it is enough to make it invalid. Masav Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Zera is going to challenge, and he's going to bring a scenario where you put a meal offering into its vessel at the wrong time. And this is an interesting interpretation of this, of putting a meal offering into a vessel. What meal offering are we talking about? The lechem hapanim, the showbread. What is its vessel? What makes it kaddish? You know what it is? Putting it on the table. The shulchan, where it sits for a week from Shabbos to Shabbos, that is the vessel that it is sanctified by. So what happens every Shabbos? Every Shabbos is 12 lechem hapanim, 12 showbread on the table, on 2 racks, 6 breads on each. And the Kohanim would slide one set out and put the other set of 6 in, so that there were always breads on the table. What happens? The Kohen forgot to do it on Shabbos, and Sunday he comes in and says, "Oh my goodness, I have to do this." And on Sunday, which is not the correct time for this lechem hapanim to be put on the shulchan, he puts a set of breads, of 12 breads on the lechem hapanim on the table on Sunday. Now that's not the correct time. So what happens? That should become invalidated because you say that it's sanctified enough to become invalid. Masiv Rabbi Zera asks a question. He puts on the breads and the bazichin, which we saw many times already. It's the 2 bowls of frankincense that go on the mizbeach. That's the sort of like the komets, the fistful that come off of the table. So the Siddur Salechem Sabazichin Acha Shabbos. He did so after Shabbos. V'hiktir Sabazichin b'Shabbos. And then on Shabbos he brings the bazichin. He puts it on the mizbeach. Psula. So that's going to be invalid because it wasn't set up on Shabbos properly to be there for the 7 days as it's supposed to be. So the frankincense, the bowls of levina are going to be invalid. So what does he do? Ketzad Yasen. But the breads are still valid. Only the frankincense would be the part that's invalid because he put it on the, he took it off. It wasn't there for 7 days. In any case, so what does he do with the breads that are on the table? So he put it on Sunday instead of Shabbos. So that's invalid. It's the wrong day. So he leaves it till Shabbos, and Shabbos accounts as if he put it on that Shabbos, and then he leaves it to the next Shabbos, and it will be there for nearly 2 weeks, and that's going to be valid. So what does it do? Leave it there for the following Shabbos. Because even if it was on the table for many days, it doesn't invalidate it. Now, the Gemara asks why. Based on what you just said, that even a vessel, even in the wrong time, a vessel sanctifies it, not enough to make it valid, but enough to make it invalid. So let these showbreads, let the lechem apanim be sanctified. And then it'll become invalidated because it was there at the wrong time. And you just said that even though that it's not enough to sanctify it outside of its correct time, it's enough to sanctify it to invalidate it outside the correct time. Amar Rabba, Manda Kamaisiv, Shaper Kamaisiv. The questioner is asking a good question. However, but however, he's teaching us something that comes from a brisa. So we're going to have to explain that as well, because otherwise we have a contradiction between the brisas. And so we're going to have to say this answer. Kusavar, that the Avodah Rabbi Avin, his opinion is Kusavar Laila Ein Mechusazman, that nighttime doesn't count as an invalid time, an incorrect time for the carbon. Since in other words, what's the reason the placing the komets into the bowl, into the vessel, is going to be invalid? The reason is because it's not the correct time. Yeah, but once the morning comes, that's the correct way to do this. To do this vessel, that's the correct way to do this kmitza. The kometz has to go into the vessel, and therefore it's going to sanctify it even at night, because it's just missing the time. The sanctification in the vessel is possible, is appropriate for this kmitza in the morning. So the nighttime, it's not going to count as an invalidation. However, the idea is that the nighttime is really a part of that day. It's on the correct day. It's simply not the correct moment within the day. However, if it's the wrong day of the week, it's the wrong day of the year, that's going to be an invalidation. Yoim mechusazman. However, if it's the wrong day of the week, that's going to be a mechusazman. That's going to change and count as invalid, and the vessel will not even sanctify it at all. So you know why the lechem apanim is still kosher? Because that you put it on Sunday, it's the wrong day of the week. The table doesn't have any any sanctification to give this showbread. The lechem apanim is not nikdash, doesn't become kadosh through the table because it's the wrong day of the week. It's not a day for showbread for lechem apanim. Not so for the kaimitz. The kaimitz and the mincha, this is the day. It's the correct day. It's just you have to wait a few hours, a few minutes, right? It's the correct day. This is the carbon for today. That's not enough to count it as invalid. So Rava is saying that the two brises, the distinction we're going to have to make why the lechem apanim, the showbread that you put on the table and you put on the shulchan on Sunday is not going to be invalid because it's not even the right day. It doesn't have the power to sanctify it, to make it kaddish, even to invalidate it. Not so when you did it nighttime instead of daytime. When you put the kamitza, when the kohen went ahead and he took a kamitza from a mincha and put it into a klisharis, into a holy vessel, it's going to sanctify it and invalidate it even, and then you can't put it back in and mix it in and make a new and do the mincha or redo the mincha. The reason is because that's the correct day. So it's enough to sanctify it because you're right. You're in the right moment, but not fully in the right moment because it's still nighttime and you need to wait for the sun to come up. However, Ravina has a different interpretation. Amar Ravina shekadam v'silke. Ravina said, no, really, that would invalidate it. But right before Shabbos, he takes off the breads and puts it back on Shabbos. So this way, it was done in the right way. So I skipped the line. Sorry. So the end of Rava is Kimati Shimsha Tikdush V'Tipasil. So when Friday night comes, that's the moment of Shabbos entering, so it should become invalidated. So Ravina said, no, he actually removes it from the table at that moment, right close to Friday night. He removes it from the table. So this way, when Shabbos comes in, that is the correct time for the showbread. It's not on the table, and then he puts it right back on Shabbos, and that's gonna and then in the morning, right at that moment of the morning, he puts it back on, and it's going to be kosher. And it's going to be valid. So indeed, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's going to be on the table. Thursday, Friday, it'll be on the table. They'll take it off right before it becomes invalidated, meaning as the morning comes, and he puts it back on, and that's going to make it kaddish. Marzutra v'tema Ravashi. However, either Marzutra or Ravashi, the two versions of who said this, he says, no, you don't have to take it off. When does it become invalid? When you do something at a time that it matters and it was done incorrectly. However, this person that put the showbread, the lechem apanim on the table Sunday, that's way off the mark. That's like an animal did it. It's like a monkey put it on the table. It doesn't count as if it was done at all. It's not a human action because it's so far off the mark. That's what it means. Obviously, the person is a human, and it counts, and the action is theirs, but it doesn't count as far as the Beis Hamikdash is concerned. It's a non-entity. It's a non-action, and so you don't have to take it off and put it back on. It never really went on incorrectly. It's so incorrect. It's so far off the mark that it doesn't count as an action at all. It can even be that he did not go ahead and remove it right before and then put it back on so that it didn't become invalidated. Rather, we see the action as not counting. Since it's entirely off the mark of the mitzvah, nasa kamisha sidra kof. It's as if an animal, a kof, a monkey, whatever it is, a chimpanzee, is the one who put it on the mizbeach. In other words, completely shalem midaita. It doesn't count as a intentional act because it wasn't put on Shabbos, which is the time, simply at the wrong moment on that day, at the Friday night instead of Shabbos day, etc. Which would be considered b'chus lacking the correct time, and that would be an invalidation. But over here, it's as if the action was never done. and therefore, when the time comes, we don't say it became invalid because it was put on the wrong time. It actually wasn't put on. It's as if it happened on its own, that it went on the table. So you don't have to remove it to put it to save it from becoming invalid, even if it's there the entire time. Friday night, Shabbos day, not a problem because it doesn't count as being done at the incorrect time. It just wasn't done. It just happened. It's like it just happened. Ze'akla. Going back to the Mishnah said a rule that the Kohen is going to go to the mikveh in the morning, and then it says, as a rule, anybody that crouches on his feet, meaning that they have a bowel movement, so they have to go to the mikveh, and before going back into the base of mikdash, and anybody that passes water, so they have to wash their hands and feet again. So the Gemara says, okay. So the passing water, we understand why he has to wash his legs, his feet, because maybe there are some droplets that got on his feet, and so he has to wash it. Eliyadayim, my time. Why does he have to wash his hands? Now, the bowel movement, the crouching on the feet, which the Mishnah said, that is talking about during the day, that the Kohen was in the middle of the avodah throughout the day, and he has to relieve himself. So he would have to go to the mikveh in the middle of the day before he comes back in. But during the night or the morning, in any case, as they start their avodah in the morning, they would go to the mikveh. That's what Tessa says over here. However, the washing of the hands, that's particular to the morning as well. So why does he have to wash his hands and feet again? After all, it's not like a bowel movement. So therefore, why does he have to do this? To that he says the feet have to be washed because maybe there are droplets. But what about the hand? My time. Amar Rabbi Abba. So Rabbi Abba said, Zose Meres, mitzvah l'shavshef, that a person has to clean themselves so that if there are droplets on their foot, they're supposed to wipe that off, and therefore his hands also need to be washed. And the reason for this is, and we'll see more of this tomorrow, that there was a concern that if somebody has droplets on their foot, that may mean that they have an anatomical abnormality, which it causes them to have droplets on themselves when they urinate, and also may mean that they are infertile, and that would then mean that if they have children, that it would be a question of mamzer, and it would cause and people would say about look at this guy, he's clearly got an anatomical abnormality, which should make him infertile, and yet here we have someone he's introducing to us as his son, and that causes all sorts of rumors, and so therefore a person has to clean their legs if there are droplets on it, which was the way they would, which was a concern they had. Obviously, they didn't have toilet bowls and bathrooms the way we would have it, and so this was a concern. Tomorrow we'll see this idea that there's a mitzvah l'shavshef to clean, and that's why both his hands and legs have to be washed before going back into the base of mikdash for avodah. We'll stop here at the top of Lamed at 38. Yashar Koach. Have a great